Today, President Trump is very critical about NATO countries because they're not meeting their 2% target.
Do you think that your announcement will perhaps stop Mr. Trump's criticisms on Prime Minister Kuczynski's? I would like to allow you to listen to the interpretation, but Canada's not respecting its 2% spending target. Is Canada doing enough? Should it do more? Should it increase military spending to 2%?
We have always emphasized that decisions around Canadian foreign policy, Canadian defence policy, will be made by Canadians in Canada. We have we have completed over the past couple of years a ambitious and comprehensive review of our defence policy, and strong, secure, engaged defence policy means we'll be increasing by about 70% our investments in defence over the next decade. We are making significant procurement decisions, and we are always focused on actually having the capacity and the capabilities needed by our international partners, including NATO. Canada will continue to step up. We've been part of every single NATO mission since the very beginnings of NATO. We will continue to be there with effective and performing troops and supports to demonstrate our continued unflinching support for the transatlantic alliance. The 2% metric is an easy shorthand. It's one way of seeing how people are spending and investing in their military capacities. But obviously it is a very specific and to a certain extent limited tool. It doesn't talk about actual capacities. It doesn't actually talk about how much a country is not just going to spend on its military, but how much it's going to engage in actions and activities that do tangibly and concretely advance the security of NATO, the stability of regions in the world that are of preoccupation to NATO members. We are very pleased that, yes, over the past year we have invested significantly more in our military than Canadian governments had in the past. That's a good thing. But we did it not because of people talking about a 2% goal. We did it because it's the right thing for Canada, both for our own defense, but also for ensuring that we are capable of having the kind of impact that we know we need to have in the world, that the world, particularly partners like our NATO partners, expect us to be able to have. Our investments in defense spending, our increase of 70% over 10 years of our defense spending is not about some external targets. It's about making sure that Canadians, and specifically the women and men of the Canadian forces, have the tools and the capacities to deliver on what Canadians expect of us to be delivering around the world.
Canada?
Aiden Houston, Suwonya Daily. Mr. Trudeau, it's no secret that since the recent G7 conference that your relationship with the current American administration has soured a little bit. I wonder if you could speak a little bit as to where that relationship is now, and also if you could compare it to your relationship with Latvia and also with the Russian Federation.
First of all, the relationship between Canada and the United States is unlike the relationship between any two countries anywhere in the world. The depth of economic cooperation, the investments, the flow of over $2 billion worth of goods back and forth across our border every single day means that we are two countries that are more closely integrated on trade, on security, on people-to-people ties than any two countries in the world. We are closest neighbors, strongest allies, and yes, best friends. And the relationship between Canada and the United States goes far beyond the personalities and the relationship between whoever happens to be Prime Minister and whoever happens to be President at any given moment. I will say that from the very beginning I have focused on what Canadians expected of me with the American president, that is to have a constructive, positive working relationship, while at the same time being very clear about standing up for Canadian interests and Canadian values. In any relationship of this size and scope, there are going to be moments of contention and moments where we get along better. But through all this, the flow of goods and opportunities on both sides of our borders continue and will continue. So I look forward to continuing to work with President Trump on the modernization and renewal of NAFTA. I look forward to increasing the benefits of trades as they accrue to citizens in both of our countries, and all three countries if we include Mexico, and recognize that while we go through disagreements like we are right now on the punitive tariffs that the U.S. has imposed on Canadian steel and aluminum and our retaliatory actions, we very much hope that we will get through this and continue to benefit fully from the geographic proximity and the tremendous personal friendships between Canadians and Americans.
National radio. I think it was touched a bit already, but Mr. Trudeau, you are here before NATO summit tomorrow in Brussels. And considering what recently happened in G7 summit in Canada, do you have concerns that NATO summit in Brussels might go rough as well? And also, perhaps also about, what do you think about Mr. Trump's and Putin's meeting in Helsinki?
I think, first of all, it's important that when we have gatherings, whether it be a NATO summit or the G7 summit, that there be an opportunity to have frank and open dialogue between fellow leaders. I think it's extremely important that these create opportunities for us to highlight where we need to work together and want to work together. And certainly at the G7, we addressed the core challenge that all of our countries are facing, is how to ensure that the economic growth that is happening through trade, through modernization, through various elements in our economies benefits everyone in our societies, benefits the middle class. And that's something that we had excellent conversations around where there was much agreement at the G7. There were also opportunities for us to disagree on issues around climate change, issues around development, and indeed issues around trade. But it is important that we have ongoing dialogues. I'm looking forward to a NATO meeting in which there will be a reaffirmation of the broad and deep support for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The strength, the unity, the solidarity of NATO is going to be a message that I'm expecting to come out free and clear, even though I have no doubt that there will be calls for greater investments in defense spending. That's a natural part of it. We've done more investments over the past years, all of us as members, but there's always more to do, and I have no worries that there will be frank and open discussions amongst friends and allies around that table, and that's part of what these summits need to provide for them to be able to do. On expectations for the Putin-Trump summit, listen, I'm not going to make predictions. I can simply reinforce that from the Canadian perspective, we certainly hope that the message is passed very clearly to President Putin that his actions in destabilizing and disregarding the international rules-based order that has been successfully underpinned by NATO, amongst others, over the past 75 years or so, is extremely important, and that we certainly hope that Russia will choose to become a more positive actor in the global sphere than it has chosen to be in the past years.
Prime Minister, picking up on what you just said, just last week Donald Trump said, and I believe I'm quoting him accurately, he's fine with Vladimir Putin. How much does that concern you?
I think as usual, we look forward to seeing the substance of the discussions, the conclusions that come out of the summit between Putin and Trump. There is always a certain amount of positioning before these summits, but we are expecting and hoping that a reaffirmation of the important stability work that NATO has done, the important defense of a international rule of law is going to be at the center of the concerns that need to be brought directly to President Putin. His invasion of Crimea, his interference in the Donbass, his actions elsewhere around the world, particularly most notably on UK soil in Salisbury, are things that require a clear and firm response from the international community.
I'm not sure I quite understand, which is just, are you worried about this meeting?
I think any time there is a high-level summit between the United States and Russia, there is inevitably it's a significant meeting with potential positive or negative consequences, and I think we all need to be thoughtful about how we're going to approach this. And I know there will be discussions around it at NATO, but as a default, I always think it is better to have meetings and engagements and dialogue and conversations, including with people that you disagree with, because that is how we move forward as a global community.